Bharat, you don't have any jurisdiction over the PPP program. When this thing was designed, Congress could have said, and let's make sure the Congressional Oversight Committee looks at all of this. But right now, there is no oversight committee, is there?
That's correct. The Oversight Commission that I'm on does not have oversight authority over this money.
At the start of the pandemic, the government flooded the economy with billions of dollars in pandemic assistance, money for Americans out of work, for businesses facing bankruptcy, for health care to pay for testing and vaccines. And at the same time, there were a lot of concerns about who specifically was getting that money. As long as we have this health crisis, we're going to face this economic crisis, and we need more stimulus. But with that stimulus, we need oversight. Investment firms, private jet owners, basketball teams, and restaurants, big ones like Shake Shack and Nathan's Famous. We also know there was just outright, jaw-dropping fraud. As the New York Times put it back in May of 2020, we're talking taxpayer money for struggling businesses going to companies that didn't exist, employees who weren't real. Here's the sad truth. Whenever the government sends money out the door, there is always a risk of fraud. We know it. Fraudster's going to fraud. And over the last 2 years, the government has approved $5 trillion in pandemic relief. That is a historic amount. And the fraud could be too. Investigators say it could be in the billions. So NBC News is relaunching a longtime series you may remember, The Fleecing of America. We are going to look at fraud more closely, waste, abuse. And just as importantly, we will look at the people trying to go after the fraudsters and those trying to prevent it from happening in the first place or again. Because let's be honest, we are going to have another disaster, and we want to have confidence that when the government steps in to help, it's spending taxpayer money in the right way. So this week, we are bringing you stories about what happened to COVID relief aid and what is being done about it. 2 years ago, the pandemic shut down America. Millions stayed home, and businesses without customers teetered on the edge. The government jumped in, providing billions in emergency aid. To get money to business owners fast, Congress removed requirements like providing tax returns. And watchdogs warned that could lead to rampant fraud.
Do you believe if the government would have taken a few more days or a few more weeks to put these controls in place, we wouldn't be in this situation with all this fraud?
Absolutely. The fraud amounts that we're going after criminally as a nation, really, not just my office, that would have been reduced dramatically.
While fraud in the Paycheck Protection Program is well known, another one, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, run by the Small Business Administration, provided over $385 billion to small businesses. And from the start, it too was targeted by fraudsters.
To date, in this particular program, we had identified over $87 billion in potential fraud.
Authorities were alarmed to see online tutorials to help commit fraud. And the warnings came within months. July 2020, quote, serious concerns of potential fraud. 3 months later, another report, perhaps $60 billion in fraud to people using the same address or bank account. Last May, over $6.6 billion possibly paid to people using stolen identities. In October, $4.5 billion in potential overpayments. And a month later, more than $3.6 billion paid to potentially ineligible businesses, some flagged on the government's Do Not Pay anti-fraud list.
There is a balance that we can strike to protect the taxpayer and to help American small businesses. And I think we definitely missed that opportunity, and we should never miss it again.
In response, the Small Business Administration tells NBC News it's worked closely with the Inspector General to identify and address all areas of concern. And last Friday announced the creation of a Fraud Risk Management Board to enhance controls to prevent fraud. Now it's up to law enforcement to try to recover taxpayer money.
Do you think you've tackled the lion's share of it, or is this just the tip of the iceberg?
I don't believe we're anywhere near the bottom of that iceberg. We're just getting going.
In Ohio, one man pleaded guilty to using his COVID small business loan to buy a $32,000 boat. In Georgia, a woman used her loan to pay for a vacation in Miami. In Oregon,
we have currently 4 prosecutors working 100% of their time on these cases. And that That's a big ask of our office.
Last year, his office charged a man with submitting false applications for several companies and using the money to buy 25 properties in Oregon and California and purchase nearly 16,000 shares of Tesla stock. He's since pleaded guilty.
So what happened to the Tesla stock?
Well, the Tesla stock went from his $2 million investment to over $11 million. We seized that stock from 2 different brokerage accounts. In the end, we cleared $11 million, which was $9 million more than he started with.
Good news for taxpayers, but not nearly enough to make up for the billions never to be recovered. As of today, we don't know how much taxpayer money could be lost to fraud in this particular program because most of that money that went to small businesses were loans, and anyone who got one of those loans doesn't have to start paying it back until 30 months later. This summer, when those loans come due, investigators expect they will have a better idea of the total fraud. Tomorrow, we'll take a closer look at what happened with the Paycheck Protection Program, where that money doesn't have to get paid back. So here's a clue. There's going to be huge fraud.